So I've just finished reading King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo, which is her 6th installment in the Grishaverse series. It is the first book of a new duology that she's been working on, and the second book is set to come out sometime in 2021. I don't remember if that's early 2021 or late 2021. But yeah. So like I did in the last review video that I made, I'm going to split this video up into non-spoiler review and then spoiler review. That way I have a bit of an opportunity to talk about the book in two different ways. So my overall feelings after having just finished read this book were generally quite positive. I thought that it was an interesting read, however, it wasn't the most exciting book that I've ever read. I definitely think that Leigh Bardugo's first two series were written much better, and I'll talk about it a bit more later on. This book follows the story of Ravka 3 years after the Civil War, so that is 3 years of Nikolai being king. It follows Nikolai's struggles as a ruler of a broken country, where every day there is a new threat of war coming from all the different countries. He must also fight to secure his claim to the throne by marrying someone and securing an heir. And this is particularly important in the storyline because there are many people that are claiming to be Landstoff descendants, and they're claiming that they are the rightful heirs to the thrones. So Nikolai needs to find a wife and make a child and make an heir soon. We also follow Nina Zenik on an extraction mission in Fjerda. She and two other Grisha are on an undercover mission to extract other Grisha from Fjerda that wish to escape. We also get to witness the extent of her grief after Matthias's passing, and we get to see her deal with this traumatizing experience, and we see how she learns to cope with Matthias being gone. Okay, so now on to my rankings. I'm going to rank this book based on writing style, the plot, the pacing, the overall world building, the characters, and the villain. And then at the end, I will give my overall rating of the book that I put on Goodreads. So for writing style, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars because her writing style, Leigh Bardugo's writing style, is very easy to read and it's very captivating, and it just makes it difficult to put the book down. Like, you find yourself keeping on reading the book. Even through its other flaws, which I'll mention, the writing style is very good and I really like it. The story is told from the points of views of 4 characters: Nikolai, Zoya, Nina, and Isaac. And I think that's really good because you get to see the point of view of different characters, and the story, the narrative is told from different perspectives. Being able to see the story from different lenses also prevents the book from becoming dull, and it prevents it from being monotone, from only hearing one voice the whole time, and it allows the reader to explore multiple characters. For the plot, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. There were 3 main plots, one following Nina, one following Nikolai and Zoya, and then the other one following Isaac. Nina and Zoya's plots were interesting and had some very impressive developments in regards to their powers. Isaac's plot, on the other hand, did add to the story, however, it was not the most interesting or necessary storyline out of all of them, which I think is one of the reasons why this rating is not a 5 out of 5 stars. Nikolai's part of the plot, however interesting it was very predictable. This also prevents the rankings reaching that 5 out of 5 stars because you already know what's going to happen, and that kind of takes away the surprise from it. I mean, the main climax of the book was a very basic villain manipulating hero. Hero nearly being convinced to give up on his ideals. Hero decides villain is wrong, and then the hero wins. Kind of climax. The plot twist was also not the most interesting plot twist. I mean, there was never a build up to it, or there was, but it was very minor, and the reader never got an emotional experience from this plot twist. It was like, oh, plot twist. Okay, whatever. However, overall, the plot was interesting. Even though it was predictable sometimes, occasionally it was unnecessary, it was overall very interesting. And like I said, this is mainly due to Leigh Bardugo's writing style. It just keeps you reading because you get to like the characters. For the pacing, I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. The story was very slow paced until roughly around the climax, which was like 75 until like 75% of the book. It was very slow paced. There was a lot of exposition and a lot of the characters trying to figure out what is actually happening. So it's very slow. We're getting a lot of information about the situation of the world, and not a lot of things happen, or not a lot of like things with big stakes happen. Lots of small things happen throughout, but it's just not important. A good book has a gradual build-up of mini climaxes until you finally get to the big one where everything comes together and you finally see the connections between all the mini plots. This book, however, had a lot of short-lived problems that caused very little damage and that our characters managed to solve very easily. The pacing of the climax was a little bit too fast as well, I think. Like, a lot of new information is given to the readers in a very fast and like info bomb sort of way, and the characters, they're also receiving this information for the first time. They deal with it and they learn and they process this information really quickly. The actual scene of the climax, however, I thought was well paced. I thought that everything that happened there was good, with purpose, even though I totally saw it coming, like I totally saw the outcome. The pacing was good, and I feel though if it was left longer, it would have been too long. I think this was just right. And now the final thing, the ending was very abrupt. Like, something happened very quickly and the explanation was super fast, didn't make much sense, and then the reader is now left wondering what the hell is happening, and now we have to wait for the second book to actually find out. For the world building, I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars because the world building, or the world, was kept quite consistent with the first 2 series, and I think that that is quite an achievement because you need to be careful not to undo what you've already done and to stay consistent with your characters and the world that you've built. For example, there is still a very tight focus on religion within Ravka, which is quite consistent with the Shadow and Bone trilogy, because there was the whole issue with becoming saints and all of these people who are worshipping, and a lot of people fear the Grisha because they don't know where their power comes from. All of these worries and all of these pressures of sainthood and whatnot are brought back in this book, which I think is quite good as well. We also get a different kind of world building in Fjerda. It builds up from what we learned in the Six of Crows duology, but now we get to see Fjerda from a more commoner's point of view. We get to see how normal life is like for regular Fjerdans, which I thought was quite nice. It adds more levels and more layers to the world that she's building. We also have a redefinition of the capability and the limits of Grisha power. Now, I think for me, this is one of the reasons why I did not give it a 5 out of 5 stars, because I personally think that the Grisha have now practically become too powerful, and I think the laws that she had set up in the beginning have been completely changed, And I don't really like that. That's not consistent with what we know, and it just makes the Grisha too powerful in my opinion. Okay, so to discuss the characters and the villain, I'm going to have to go into the spoiler zone, so if you haven't read King of Scars, you should stop now. For the characters, I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars, because I think that Leigh Bardugo has put in so much time and effort into writing all of these characters. We get backstories, all of these characters are well-formed people with real motives, and as a reader, I could feel an emotional connection to each and every one of these, whether it be love, admiration, hatred, annoyance. Like, I got an emotional response with all of these characters, which is fantastic job on the author's part. I don't like, however, that all of the couples from the Shadow and Bone trilogy got married. Like, bear in mind, there's only been 3 years, and I just don't think it's realistic that all of these couples got married within 3 years. Like, I understand maybe if one of them did and like others were like engaged or still dating, that would make more sense. That's more realistic. But for all of your couples to just get married, like bam, married. I don't know. It doesn't make much sense, realistically. And it's kind of annoying because now all these characters are interacting like, oh, sweetie, darling, honey. They did not used to react like that with each other, and it just changes their whole dynamic. And it changes the characters. Like, the way I know them, they're completely different now. So I definitely think that we missed a little bit of character development in there, in the sense that we missed seeing their relationship growth. So it's kind of jarring to see this sudden change because they're completely different from how we knew them. I think, for me personally, Nikolai is my favorite character in this series because I really admire the way that he deals with his problems, with his inner demon, and also with his problems outside. The way he reacts to situations is very charismatic and very cleverly thought out, and I find that very impressive. I personally like those kinds of characters that are quick on their feet, and then the solutions that they come up with are actually quite genius. His plot development, like I said earlier, was very predictable, and I think the ending of his arc was left quite ambiguous because we don't know if he still has the demon inside him or if the demon that he refers to at the end, we don't know whether that's like the actual demon or just his personal demons, you know, like the darkness that has built up within his personality over the course of these troubling years, which is also very understandable. But again, he could be referring to either or, and the reader is kind of left unsure whether he actually succeeded in getting rid of the demon or not. I also don't like how he forced the Shoe Princess to marry him. Like, that is very, very harsh. Like, I get you need to find a wife, but this is not the right way to do it. And it's also very unlike Nikolai to just rush into something like this. He's never even spoken a word to her, and now he's like, I'm forcing you to marry me. You don't get a say. Like, no. What world is this? No. Nina was my next favorite character. I really felt for her as she was struggling to let go of Matthias, and I was very curious as to see the development of her powers. I really liked her relationship with Hannah, and although it's a bit too soon, I really look forward to seeing them as a couple sometime in the next book, maybe towards the end, because it's too soon. Like, Matthias just died. I think she needs a bit more time to grieve. But I'm really looking forward to Hannah and her relationship because the two of them were so cute, and I liked the way they interacted with each other, and I think they match each other quite well, actually. They're both very brave and independent women, very strong and quite defiant of the rules. I also think the ending, where she infiltrates Brum's household, was so badass, so awesome, and I can't wait to see how that plays out in the next book. Zoya was a great character too. She's very strong and driven, which I find to be very admirable. However, I did not like the whole arc where she falls in love with Nikolai and Nikolai falls in love with her. I just don't think they're right for each other. Like, she deserves so much more than some arrogant king. And yes, he's very smart and he is Ravka's best hope and she loves Ravka. But he's just not good for her, you know? She deserves someone better, someone more stable, and someone who can actually support her emotionally and like support her baggage. Nikolai has too much of his own baggage and Zoya can't help him with that. I also don't like how the Grisha powers have expanded so much. I mentioned this earlier, but now that I can talk about spoilers, it's just kind of ridiculous how all the boundaries of the different classes or the different groups, how they've just been broken down. Like, that kind of takes away something that made someone feel very special, you know? Because when you're part of a small group, it forms bonds that way. And we saw that in the first trilogy, how the different groups didn't really like each other that much. But now saying that anyone could do anything is kind of ridiculous. Like, these Grishas now have no limit to their powers, and not even nature stops them because they are connected with nature and they can do everything now. So it's kind of ridiculous. Like, there's no limit. They're too powerful. And that brings so many problems for Ravka because people were already fearing Grisha with the limited power they already had. But now that they're powerful, people are going to think, or Grisha are going to think, that they should rule the world. And we've already seen this happen. Power, they chase power forever, and it's so bad for them. But now, also the fact that Zoya is the only one that knows this information puts her in the position of playing God. She gets to decide who is worthy of knowing this information, and she has to think very carefully about it, because telling the wrong person could lead to a whole new Darkling situation where they want to rule the world. Okay, so for the villain, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars for a couple of reasons. First of all, there isn't really a villain in this book, more like an impending doom sort of feeling. We have a couple of antagonists, like the priest guy, and then there's Sancta Elisabetta, and then at the end, of course, the Darkling, and also the demon that's inside of Nikolai. But again, none of these are like the main villain. I think the biggest thing that I didn't like about this is that the whole problem, all of this, is still the Darkling. Like, why is the Darkling the main villain again? We already had him in the original trilogy. Why do we have him again? Find a new villain. I think Ravka has so many problems and they don't need the Darkling coming back again. And now, plus the fact that he's back, what are the new constructions of his power? Does he still have power? Because he's now in the body of the priest. Does he look like the priest or does he look like the Darkling? Does he sound like the priest or does he sound like the Darkling? What is happening with this? It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense because they've rewritten the laws of nature. Like, suddenly you can bring people back from the dead if you have a piece of their magic. I think, though, the priest was a very good antagonist because he challenged Nikolai and Zoya in a completely different way than the rest of their situations. And it really challenges them and it forces them to think about the consequences of their actions and how people will respond. And I think that's quite good. Like, the priest is pushing them to think about certain aspects quite differently. Okay, so overall, I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars. I think the biggest problem that I had was the pacing and the fact that the villain was still the Darkling and that he comes back again. Like, how many resurrection stories do we need to have? Please. I liked this book, don't get me wrong. It's just that I wasn't satisfied by it. I think I finished the book feeling like, oh, okay, that's fine, I guess. Like, it didn't really leave that much of an impression on me, which is quite upsetting because I generally love Leigh Bardugo's writing. She's one of my absolute favorite authors, and so even though this book didn't score that very high for me, I still highly recommend it because it's part of her Grishaverse, and any opportunity you have to expand on it and to learn the characters a bit more, definitely take it. And there are some good parts of the plot. Don't get me wrong, it's an interesting read. It's just that there's not a lot of emotional stakes that you feel. It's more character connections, and that's more what this book is for. If you like character development and world building, this is the book for you. If you love interesting, like, fantastical plots and like amazing villains, unfortunately I don't think this is the one for you. But still, I think you should read this book. I still really liked it. And yeah, those are my thoughts on King of Scars.